Former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton has pleaded not guilty to charges of mishandling classified information and keeping top secret documents at his home. Bolton entered the plea at a Maryland federal court. He is the third prominent Trump critic to face prosecution in the past few weeks. He's accused of sharing with his family more than 1,000 pages of notes that included sensitive national defense information. Bolton served under Trump in his first term, but the two butted heads on many foreign policy issues, which led to Trump then firing him. Bolton denies the charges against him, which he attributes to Trump weaponizing the justice system against his enemies. And we can now take a closer look at the charges against John Bolton and how he went from Trump confidant to critic.
President Donald Trump's opinion of his former national security advisor shifted from this.
He's highly respected by everybody in this room.
To this.
I think he's a bad guy. Yeah, he's a bad guy.
John Bolton was charged on 18 counts for allegedly storing classified information at home, sharing classified intelligence with relatives, and using a private email address to transmit top-secret information. Bolton rejects the allegations. The indictment is the latest chapter in a series of investigations that go back to 2020, when the Justice Department tried to prevent Bolton from publishing his memoir, The Room Where It Happened. In the book, the veteran diplomat, who became known as a foreign policy hardliner, harshly criticizes Trump, calling him uninformed and manipulable. The initial investigation fizzled out, but was revived under the Biden administration with new evidence. It later gained momentum under Trump's current term with a raid at Bolton's home in Maryland in August, and now the indictment. When asked about the charges against Bolton, President Trump appeared surprised.
I didn't know that. You told me for the first time, but I think he's, a bad person. I think he's a bad guy. Yeah, he's a bad guy. It's too bad, but it's the way it goes.
And Bolton is not the only Trump critic to have been charged recently. In late September, former FBI Director James Comey was also indicted, accused of making false statements to a Senate Judiciary Committee in 2020 over a classified information leak. Comey pleaded not guilty in the court hearing and denies any wrongdoing.
And I'm innocent.
His trial is set to take place in early January 2026. Comey's lawyers argue these indictments constitute selective prosecution and may signal a broader revenge campaign by Trump aimed at political opponents.
We can now speak to Sean Bigley. He's a law professor at Chapman University in California. Welcome to DW. Now, how strong is the case against John Bolton?
Well, I just finished reading the indictment, and if there's one word I could use to describe it, it would be damning. It is not a good look for somebody of Mr. Bolton's stature and experience in the U.S. government to do what he did. And there are some striking parallels that I see with the Hillary Clinton email case. You have somebody at a very senior level of government who should have known better, frankly, and who, through his own words on a number of occasions, seems to admit as much. And somebody who had a special room that was authorized in his home during the time he was National Security Advisor, where he was authorized to review and possess classified information. He was subsequently read out from that access, and when that room was disassembled, he was specifically admonished by the government that he was not to retain anything. So he had an opportunity then to turn it over. Subsequently, when he published his book, he was admonished by a federal judge that he was at risk of potential criminal prosecution. So he had another opportunity then to turn over the documentation that was in his possession, and he didn't do it on either occasion. So from a purely legal standpoint, I think he is in some real jeopardy here. And, he's not a young man. John Bolton is apparently 76 years old, and these charges carry some substantial penalties if he is in fact convicted.
Yeah.
So he could be looking at spending the rest of his life potentially in prison.
A lot at stake here for him. He says he's the latest target in what he calls the weaponization of the DOJ, but his case is quite different from the ones brought against James Comey and Letitia James, isn't it?
It is. And, I think his lawyers will try to make, and are certainly already trying to make in the media, what is known as a selective prosecution claim. It is a very difficult case to make. It's an affirmative defense, or excuse me, rather a procedural defense. And essentially, you have to show that not only was the defendant targeted for some sort of improper discriminatory purpose, in this case, ostensibly his political views, but you also have to be able to show that others similarly situated were not. And that is where I think Mr. Bolton and his lawyer are going to struggle. You have several cases historically, General David Petraeus, former CIA director, Sandy Berger, a former national security advisor, both of whom were convicted of something very similar to what Mr. Bolton did, albeit less serious in the nature and the scope of what was alleged in those cases compared to what's alleged here. And so I think he's really going to struggle trying to make that argument.
In a statement, Mr. Bolton's lawyer says her client kept diaries, and that is not a crime. As someone who has represented defendants in similar cases, what do you make of that line of defense?
Well, it's a novel one. I give him points for creativity. I think it's, again, going to be very challenging. I certainly don't blame Mr. Bolton's defense attorney for doing what he can to sort of soften the blow, at least when it comes to a potential jury pool. But at the end of the day, the facts in this case are very problematic for Mr. Bolton. And to your point, they do differ in their scope and in the meticulous way in which they're laid out compared to the Comey and the Letitia James cases. Not to say that those cases are brought for improper purposes, but when you read the indictments in both of those cases, they're very perfunctory, very brief on the facts. And here you have what appears to be a very meticulous, long-running investigation into this matter that's brought by a career prosecutor in Maryland. And so definitely some differences, I think, that the government at least is going to be able to hang their hat on.
Yeah, we only have about a minute left, but there is something that jumped at me when I read this. He is, of course, not the first person accused of mishandling classified information. You mentioned Hillary Clinton there. Donald Trump himself, of course, ran into some trouble with the law when he took all these documents back home after his first stint in the White House. Why is this such a recurring phenomenon?
It's a great question. I think, unfortunately, being in proximity to power sometimes breeds contempt for the rules. And we've seen that, as you pointed out, on a number of occasions. Hillary Clinton's case, some eerie parallels here. I think certainly the attorney in this case is going to want to point to it as something that, ironically, she wasn't prosecuted for. But the man who made that judgment that, quote, no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case, ironically, is himself now facing indictment, and that would be James Comey. So, it's unfortunate that people do this. I think it sets a bad precedent for everyone else.
Yeah.
And hopefully people learn their lesson.
That's Professor Sean Bigley of Chapman University. We appreciate your insights tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.